Stephen Wilson, welcome back to Australian Musician.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. It's great to talk to you again. Our last conversation was about 18 months ago, and it ended with you saying, "Watch this space," regarding another concert tour. And now here we are with an incredible new album, The Overview, and a world tour, including a return to Australia in November. So, first of all, congratulations on another great record. Are you happy with the response so far?
I think so. I mean, I'm very insulated from all that stuff because I don't read any comments, I don't read any reviews. But I was out on a record store signing trip last week in the UK, and people seem to like it. It's always very interesting because every time I try and do something different, and every time, of course, it's not quite what some people want, but then it is exactly what some other people want. So 30 years into my career, I've got used to that, the fact that you can't please everyone. But I'm really proud of it. I think it's another sort of interesting and different entry into my catalogue anyway.
And we're in a bit of an interesting position here where normally, whenever a Stephen Wilson tour gets announced for Australia, you're already in the middle of a run of dates in Europe or America. But at the time of recording, the first show is yet to happen. So there's a lot of speculation on what the show will entail. I know you've already said you're going to be playing the overview in full with the accompanying visuals that I know you've been previewing at cinemas across the UK. Apart from that, what can we expect this time around?
So yeah, so the second half of the show will be a performance of the new record from beginning to end with the film. So that's kind of the meat of the show. The first half is going to be a journey, through my back catalogue, and what's always exciting to me is because I don't have any hits to speak of, I'm kind of free to choose whatever I want. So at least I feel that way. So I'm kind of going back through my back catalogue and thinking, well, what tracks perhaps thematically have something in common with the overview? And it could be something lyrical, it could be a feeling in the music, it could be that sense of space, because I've done a lot of stuff over the years which kind of nods to this idea of space and space rock. So I'm kind of going back and picking tracks which I feel, will make this journey feel cohesive, from the beginning of the show to the end of the show. It's going to be a long show, two halves with encores. So there's an opportunity to really delve into the back catalogue. And I won't say any more than that, but prepare to be surprised. Pleasantly, hopefully. So this time around, the film for the overview has been created by this young kid. Well, young kid, he's in his early 20s. He's young kid compared to me.
Mm.
He's only 20s, called Miles Skarin, and he's created this incredible 42-minute, basically companion to the album, which takes you from Earth to the other side of the cosmos, just like the music does. Takes you on this incredible journey through space. And Miles is much more au fait, being a younger guy, is much more au fait with using computers and AI and all of that stuff, which I don't understand. And he's created something. One of the things about, I think, when you create visuals that are to do with space is that we're all so familiar with the kind of visual vocabulary of space. We've seen it a million times in sci-fi space movies. So it's a question really of finding a different way to kind of approach that. And I think that was the challenge I gave to Miles, is find a new kind of visual identity for taking us into space. And I think, well, you'll be the judge of that, but I think he's achieved it.
You've certainly leaned into, I guess, kind of the classic vinyl format of having a side A and a side B.
Mm.
Was that kind of intentional? Did you limit yourself to like that 45-minute runtime as well?
Yeah, I think one of the other things I knew right from the beginning was this was going to be like an old school vinyl LP. So I thought, I grew up with vinyl LPs. That's what I sort of learnt music from, listening to vinyl LPs. And I learnt how to structure an album in terms of, sides. Finish side one with something strong, start side two with something strong, all that stuff. So I very much imagine this as two side-long pieces right from the beginning. So I had that kind of framework. And also that idea of kind of getting back to that 40-minute time span. Because of course, one of the things that's changed over the years, certainly with compact disc, is albums became progressively more and more long, And I think that's in direct contrast to the attention spans of listeners, which have got shorter. So as the albums were getting longer, the attention spans were getting shorter. So I think it was trying to get back to that idea of the 40-minute album as being the optimum listening experience.
Yeah, and then I see you've also kind of included a second disc on the streaming versions, just kind of splitting the tracks up for maybe getting some of those playlist numbers that are so elusive these days.
Yeah, I mean it's tough for me anyway on streaming. Streaming is not my milieu, as it were. But one of the things obviously I was aware of in creating two long tracks is that's very streaming unfriendly. So it was suggested to me that we could break it up and make them available as, because some people might want to just put like a 5-minute piece in one of their playlists. So there is that option too, yeah.
You've always seemed to have this kind of push-pull relationship with being an alternative artist, I don't know. Have you noticed a change in the demographics since in the last few years with stuff like Future Bytes and Harmony Codex and being more, I guess, active on those streaming platforms?
Well, that's a good question. The simple answer is I don't know really because I've not toured those records. So um, it's going to be interesting to see what the audience is like, having not toured since now 2018 and having made albums which were a little bit more electronic. It will be interesting to see whether the demographic has changed. That my demographic has always been slightly odd anyway. Like if I go to places like South America and India, for example, it's much younger, more metal fans. Whereas in England and Germany, it always tended to be the sort of middle-aged prog rock fans. So it'll be interesting to see whether that has changed at all. I suspect probably not. Uh, I I suspect probably not, but we'll see. I think my audience tends to be like me. They're kind of my age, my demographic, um, and they still love albums. They remember growing up with vinyl, and they remember the good old days of conceptual rock music.
Yeah.
And I try not to be pandering to those people. I think it's always important to confront expectations and bring in these other things like electronic music and ambient music and pop and metal and all those things,
Mm.
which I do. But I'm very curious to see what kind of people come to the shows. Yeah.
Yeah, the first time I spoke to you was right before To the Bone, or the To the Bone Australian tour, and I remember the first question I asked is, "What are you looking forward to?" And the first thing you said was, "The great thing about Australian audiences is that you can't really say what kind of audience they are, and that
Right.
there's so many different styles, and especially here where like in Australia in particular, progressive rock is basically just a subculture of the metal genre, which itself is already pretty small. But then there's people who come to the shows who might not necessarily listen uh, to to Yes or Opeth or all the bands that are kind of in between, and have just going on a recommendation. So I think you're certainly an eclectic audience over here.
Yeah, I think that's true. I remember in Australia, the audience was very mixed, and I think maybe, as you say, it's something to do with the fact that progressive rock per se was never really a thing in Australia. So it's, as you say, it's kind of being filtered through the metal subculture. I mean, this record has very little to do with metal, but I think one thing that metal and conceptual rock have in common is this idea of the album as a journey and not necessarily being bound by conventional pop song structures. So you can take the listener on a journey over 10, 20 minutes, whatever. But that's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, but I think progressive rock was never a thing in Australia, was it? So it's kind of like um, you don't know what people to expect. People are discovering it through all sorts of different avenues, I guess.
Yeah.
Whereas in England, there's such a strong tradition of progressive rock from the 70s. And I
Mm.
think a lot of my fans, a lot of people that listen to my music grew up with bands like Yes and Pink Floyd. Not necessarily the case in Australia. Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Interesting.
So, and speaking of kind of the British traditions, one of my favorite names that I saw when I looked at the credits for this record was Andy Partridge and his lyrical contributions. Because I've been on a bit of an XTC kick myself in the last couple of years, and It seemed to me like Andy was kind of done with writing new material, and this is now the second set of lyrics he's done for you. And uh, what's your relationship like with him now at the moment? And could you tell us a little bit about getting him on board for this one?
So Andy, I met, as you probably know, I met Andy because I was remixing a lot of the XTC catalog into spatial audio, 5.1, surround sound, all that stuff. So we met doing that, and I've, like you, I've always been a big fan, and I grew up with XTC music. So I just got to know Andy as a fan and as someone that was working on his back catalog. And he's a lovely guy, and he's so creative. And I think what made me think about Andy for this was that I wanted someone. There was a particular scene. I think of the album as having scenes in this kind of cinematic analogy. There was a particular scene where I wanted to contrast the lives of ordinary people, everyday life on Earth, little soap operas of everyday life, with these massive cosmic phenomena happening on the other side of the universe, black holes imploding, stars dying, all this stuff. And I thought about Andy because Andy, for me, is a genius at observational lyric writing, writing about everyday lives of normal people in small towns. So straight away, I called up Andy and I said, Andy, got a challenge for you. You're the best at this. This is what I'm looking for. And of course he did an amazing job. And I think Andy still loves to create. He's just not so into the recording side. He loves to collaborate with people. He loves to be the songwriter rather than the artist these days.
Do you think there's some things that can be better expressed with spoken word than through lyrics and melodies?
Well, I think the answer is that sometimes I don't write lyrics. I write something that's more kind of prosaic, and sometimes trying to sing those that stuff just doesn't work. Like for example, Perfect Life is a great example. That was essentially a story, a short story. It would have been very difficult to set that to melody and to sing that. It was a piece of prose. It was a short story almost. I've always liked that, going back to some of the very early stuff I did, like Voyage 34, from the very early days of Porcupine Tree, was essentially a story, a spoken word story, which I set to music. In that case, the voice already existed from an old 60s record, so I've always liked that, yeah, for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it's something to do with the fact that I grew up enjoying movies and enjoying books and literature as much as I enjoyed music. They all kind of fell into place in the same at the same point in my early life as a kid, reading books, seeing movies, discovering music. It was all kind of mixed up in this incredible voyage of discovery for me as a teenager and beyond. So I kind of never saw, I guess I didn't see the divisions so much, if that makes sense. Subconsciously in my mind, they were all one thing. This kind of idea of expressing yourself through conceptual work, conceptual music, conceptual film, conceptual literature. So there's always been this overlap for me, and I guess I love that. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And it seems like you're still kind of going on that journey of discovery, especially with the Atmos mixes, which at this stage is something of a luxury commodity. In my case, I do have the option to try spatial audio through Apple Music and the AirPods Pro. At the end of the day, that's still a mix down, an approximation of what you originally intend. So, for those who are kind of novices in exploring Atmos and starting off with the limitations, is there a particular mindset worth going in with, and anything specifically on this record that you're particularly proud of?
Well, so obviously, at the risk of stating the obvious, this is an album about space. So it's absolutely lends itself perfectly to the medium of spatial audio. So being able to have sounds coming from above you, from beside you, from behind you, so not just in front of you, and being able to move sounds around the listener, above the listener, you have that sense of floating, literally floating in space. Now, I understand that not everyone gets to hear the music that way, which is one of the reasons why I try and do as many of these kind of playback events as possible. And we've done them all over the world already now. Booking cinemas, inviting fans along, screening also screening the film as part of those events, allowing people to hear this music in surround sound. And there are lots of cinemas now that have surround sound, Atmos 5.1. So there are lots of opportunities there. And I think increasingly people do have surround sound at home. People have home cinema
Mm.
systems where they have Dolby Atmos 5.1. So I think the opportunities are there to encourage people to start looking at, well, I can also listen to music through my home cinema system. And I think that's only going to grow over the next few years. Cars now are beginning to be marketed with surround sound, with spatial audio, with Dolby Atmos systems installed in your car, which is amazing because that's going to be a game changer for people
Mm.
being able to listen to this. So I think we're at a kind of cusp now. It's still early days with this technology. I love it. For me, it's perfect. It's a perfect medium for my music, and I hope as many people as possible will get to hear the music the way I heard it when I mixed it.
Yeah, well, so there's no plans for that for the playback sessions of that one of the overview here as of yet, but Australians will get a chance to hear at least some of your Atmos remixing work with the upcoming cinema release of Pink Floyd Live at Pompeii. How did you how did you approach the surround mix for that one?
Well, I mean, that was quite a challenge because that was essentially recorded. Most of it was recorded as four mono feeds. Drums in mono, bass in mono, keyboards in mono, guitar in mono. That's it, That's how they recorded that performance. There are vocals occasionally, there are sound design elements occasionally, there were some overdubs, so I was able to do a little bit in terms of spatial audio. But I think in that sense, because it's a movie of a live performance, you're not looking to do anything too gimmicky anyway, because you're
Mm.
aware that people are watching an image. So it needs to reflect what you're seeing. It doesn't want to disturb the eye. So really the Atmos mix is just kind of creating a more immersive sound field of what you're looking at on the screen, which in this case is David over there, Nick
Mm.
there, Nick over there, and Roger kind of in the foreground. So there are opportunities, if you like, to make that feel a little bit more three-dimensional, but still to make you feel like it's authentic and you are watching a live performance in front of you.
Yeah, is could you see yourself doing more? I know you don't have any inside knowledge, but could you see yourself doing more remixes from from the archives of the Floyd catalog in the future if you were given the opportunity?
Can I see myself doing it? Yes, I can dream about see myself doing that. Will it happen? I honestly don't know. I guess a lot of it will depend on how well people respond to this. Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, and
Fingers
I'd like
crossed.
to I'd like to finish off just by drawing attention to a lyric from the overview, which is there's no reason for anything, just a beautiful infinity, no design and no one at the wheel, just an existential mystery. My question, Stephen, is this: is this poetic license from a character in the context of the album, or is this something that you yourself believe?
No, that's absolutely what I believe. That's absolutely what I believe. I believe that life is this incredible freak gift that we're all given, however long we've got, 70, 80, 90, 100 years. We've got that long to make some sense of this freak gift of life. There is no God, there is no creator. We are unbelievably insignificant in the universe. We are one of trillions of planets orbiting one of trillions of stars. The universe does not care about us. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Isn't that a
Just
beautiful thing?
just do whatever the hell you want, which it seems is exactly what you've been doing for the last 30, 40
Exactly.
years.
Make the most of the ride. Enjoy the ride. That's completely my philosophy. Do what you want and try and make something of significance out of this freak gift of life because I truly believe that the universe does not care about us and it's well, you only have to go into a little bit of science and that becomes very apparent very quickly, to me anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll all be enjoying the moments that we share with you on your Australian tour in November. And for anyone else listening, if you haven't heard the overview, please go and check it out. It's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Stephen.
Thank you, Josh. Pleasure to speak to you again, I should say. And I'll see you in November, guys. Thank you.